Hello, my name is Shannon Donahue, and we're honored here to be today with Amanda DeLuke, a program chair at MAAWG, working for over 7 years as a senior deliverability analyst at HigherLogic, and Ryan Steen, who has been with Constant Contact as a senior compliance specialist for 13 years. The topic today is SMS-BEC attacks, and for those of us in the MAAWG community who are in the know, maybe this acronym jumbled sentence may make a lot of sense, but for those of us who are not, can Amanda and Ryan describe, please, what an SMS-BEC attack might be?
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? First, I just want to define BEC, right? So that stands for Business Email Compromise. So basically, where an attacker gains access to a business email account to imitate an employee's identity. However, when referencing SMS-BEC, this is actually taking a step further where the attacker obtains an employee's cell phone number, typically through like an initial phishing email, and performs subsequent tasks through the SMS.
I agree with Amanda's definition there. It's essentially the same as a business email compromise. It's just a different vector of attack. It's using SMS instead. And frankly, it's a little bit more prevalent in today's technology field as email was back in the day. I think it's a significant threat.
Well, those in the MAAWG community know that we have a long history of anti-abuse mitigation and different tactics to avoid these attack vectors. How does an SMS-BEC attack even happen?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, this typically happens when an employee gives out their cell phone number. It could be through an initial email or whatnot, but they end up giving that attacker their cell phone number, which then they proceed to communicate through SMS to the victim and to obtain sort of sensitive data, such as wiring transfers, gift cards, credentials, etc., things like that. That's what ends up happening.
I'd say that this is alarmingly becoming a fairly common and easy type of attack to carry out because it ultimately comes down to trust. I think as a culture worldwide, we've learned to distrust things in email that we don't instantly recognize or may look a little bit off, but from SMS, text messaging, it's something we do every day. It's a common communication tool. And unfortunately, it's also used fairly regularly by a lot of large, seemingly secure business types like banks, software companies for things like two-factor authentication. So there's a bit of a false sense of security as far as SMS is concerned when it comes to your average user, even your more technical user. They tend to think, oh, it's text message, it's on my device, on my service provider. I could trust this information, and that's where the trouble starts.
That is an interesting point, that SMS is often thought of as a trusted and ubiquitous messaging communication platform. What are the common types of attacks people should be aware of and on the lookout for?
Right. So, a common attack that I've seen is where, the CEO is being spoofed. Sending a text message to an employee with access to a company card or even banking information, heaven forbid, right? And asks them to perform tasks such as purchasing gift cards and sending images of the gift card number and code so that it can be easily transformed into Bitcoin. So, the reason that SMS is used for this, it's really an easier way to be able to talk to the victim and be able to get images taken of those gift cards. So that way they're not manually typing out what the gift card number is and the code is. It just makes it so much easier for the attacker to get all the information that they want.
To kind of carry off of Amanda's point, there are a few different vectors that can be used with SMS that really aren't available with some of the other communication methods out there like email or social media. For example, smishing, it's where the attacker can pose to be or pretend to be someone that you already know and trust. Therefore, the information that they're providing you, we instantly take it at face value. There are some technical ways to attack someone via SMS. They can do what's called a SIM swap or a port attack type of attack, where they literally pose as that person from their own phone number, because they've essentially taken over that person's either SIM card or even their cell phone account or phone number. Because these types of attacks look like the real person, it's real hard to tell whether it's fake or not. Sometimes a little less common, somebody can clone your SIM card if they physically have access to your device or your cell phone. This can happen when you're traveling. This can happen if you leave your device somewhere where you don't necessarily keep an eye on it. There's even ways where a hacker can spoof a text message to make it appear that it's coming from a legitimate sender that you trust. And again, it comes down to, this is a trustworthy communication method according to your average user. And that's why it's so easy to obtain personally identified information or sneak into an organization using SMS, posing that you're a real person.
In a world where technology experts such as ourselves are trying to stay one step ahead of attackers and provide best practices to minimize or mitigate these future attempts at attacks, how do you avoid this risk?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to education, right? And educating everyone and your employees about this. But really, you don't want to give out your mobile telephone number in an email unless the source has been authenticated. I mean, I've seen cell phone numbers and email signatures too, so you may want to consider removing it out of your email signature. But confirming like such transactions through another method, just to make sure that it is legitimate. You want to make sure there is a clear business process put in place regarding which platforms are used for certain company tasks or actions. So that's really important.
I agree with Amanda's point about setting a business policy. I typically recommend that organizations, especially within the technology space, set a common policy as to how you communicate about business topics. I would recommend that you don't use SMS for business communication at all. You shouldn't use it for any type of two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Instead, use an app that's trusted within the industry and has end-to-end encryption, has an enrollment process that your IT team can control and monitor. Devices that are owned by an organization shouldn't be allowed to connect to networks that aren't trustworthy or secure. There should be a segmented bring your own device network that these devices use. And alternatively, you can deploy even free to use tools that your average user or employee can install on their personal device that has end-to-end encryption, that follows the company's communication policy and doesn't have the same vulnerabilities that SMS communication has. Typically, as far as education is concerned, most businesses should educate their users on how to identify and avoid SMS, BEC. Most importantly, report ones that they do catch. Pound 7726, basically it spells out spam, is the best way to report any kind of smishing, phishing, or attacks that are coming through SMS. Goes straight to the right authorities and will likely get the attacker in trouble so it doesn't continue.
This is clearly a very complex topic on an emerging attack vector on what would otherwise be considered maybe a trusted and ubiquitous messaging communication channel for many consumers. And so we appreciate you both being here today and educating myself and the MAAWG community. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate your expertise.
Thank you, Shannon.
Shannon.